We are beautifully, melanated.
Host Sarah, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
Hi, I'm Karen.
Hi, I'm Kay. Welcome to another episode. So, in continuation of our men's mental health series, we have a fabulous guest on tonight, Sameer. I will introduce him properly later. But ladies, because it might be a long episode, I'm going straight into what in the world, if you don't mind. So I was on Twitter yesterday and saw a transcript of a caller into LBC radio show to Sangeeta Miska's show, to be fair. And I wondered why he chose her. But anyway, this guy was talking about Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, well, versus Rishi Sunak for Prime Minister, because their little clown show doesn't seem to have an end up there in number 10. And he says, I'm a conservative. My father was. My daughters work in the city. We are through and through Tories, and Rishi Sunak, you know, he'll never be Prime Minister because for us, he's not British enough. He's not British and he does not love the country like Boris does. So Sangeeta went on to ask him, so what makes him not British? And of course, the usual whataboutery. You know, he's Indian, his wife is Indian, their family business is in India. He goes on to talk about the non-dom status and their green card, both of which they have now given up. So she said, so what would it take for you to accept that he's British? And he said, nothing, because there is no answer to that. The highlight of the call for me, it was 8 minutes long. I'm going to play a clip, but not all of it. The highlight for me was that he said to Sangeeta, imagine I decided I was born in India, or I think he might have mentioned Africa or India, but I decided I want to run for Prime Minister there. Wouldn't make sense, would it? And the Commonwealth probably in unison went, excuse you. That's exactly what you did when you colonized half the world. You went to people's countries and you inserted yourself at the highest level and proceeded to tell everybody how savage they were and how much they needed you to reign over them. So his idea, he finds it unfathomable then that an Indian man could run Britain. It's unbelievable. So anyway, let me play the little clip. Listen carefully, and we'll get into talking.
Rishi Sunak isn't British or English and doesn't love the country as much as Boris Johnson as a result. So I just want to clarify that with you, that he was born in this country, that he went to one of the country's most prestigious public schools, that he has worked, of course, in the city and then took up politics, that he is the man that many people credit through the furlough scheme, saved the economy. And you don't think that proves that he's British?
Was a green card, his wife and the family business, their fortune. His wife
hang on. He's relinquished the green card, first of all.
True,
and
but
quite rightly.
He had to relinquish it. His wife is not British. She holds American citizenship.
He himself is a British citizen, isn't he?
Okay, lots of people are. Half of Al Qaeda are British citizens. But you don't understand.
I'm so sorry. Can I just be very clear here? Because I just want to be clear that I've actually heard you correctly. Have you just likened Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor, and possibly the next Prime Minister, to a member of Al Qaeda?
Shemaine, I'm just saying, having a British passport doesn't mean you're a true English patriot who loves England. Boris loves England, and Rishi Sunak will be decimated if he leads the Tories into the election. I'm just telling you what Tory voters believe. He will be decimated. He didn't even get barely 40% of Tory members, let alone the electorate. He'll get about 20% of the electorate.
You're aware that Boris DeFeffel Johnson was born in New York, aren't you?
That's what I'm saying. You can be born anywhere. You know that. It's how your allegiance lies to the country. I said one of my best mates was born in
What do you
Uganda.
expect? I'm absolutely fascinated here. What do you expect Rishi Sunak, former Chancellor, British citizen, someone educated in this country, someone credited with saving thousands of businesses through furlough, someone who has dedicated his life, according to many of his backers, 100 of them, 100 MPs now. What more would you like to see him do to prove his Britishness to you, Jerry? What would it take?
Well,
what is the final thing that you think will make him British? And British enough precisely for Tory members like you to vote for him.
Granny, I got the job.
Oh, thanks, YouTube advert. So I'm going to pause it there. So let's talk. What do you think of Jerry there? And, you know, listeners, if you hear swearing, please forgive us in advance. This is quite an emotive conversation. So Karen, Sameer, Sarah, what do you think? Is Rishi Sunak British? And what does it mean to be British?
I'm actually surprised that you're surprised, Kay, to be fair, because I think, is it Jerry? I think Jerry shares the opinion of many. I think this country is still very racist. And I'm not surprised. That sort of comment just goes over my head, to be fair. There is nothing that Rishi Sunak could do to be British enough because he's not white. I think they just felt that they couldn't say that, but really that's what they were saying. That's his view. Nothing that people say surprises me. I mean, people are still upset because The Little Mermaid is going to be played by a girl of colour. I mean, oh dear, people in this country. Yeah, I'm just not surprised.
So, Karen, you were born here. Do you consider yourself British?
I do consider myself British. Second generation. I am British. However, I guess for Jerry and other small-minded people, I will never be British enough. I will never be English, I guess. No matter, some sort of thing. I wonder how many generations back do you need to go? So, are my children British then? Because I was born here. Will their children be British enough if it's 3 generations? I mean, how many generations do we need to go back to be British? It's racism. That's what it is. People are in this country, unfortunately, still very, very racist. And when I hear people say things like, oh, racism doesn't exist anymore, I just, my blood boils because that's ridiculous. That is a very good example of racism still being very, very prevalent in this country.
I suppose I'm not surprised, Karen, at the content. I'm surprised he said it out loud. That's usually the quiet part. But he said it out loud. That's what surprises me.
I think he just couldn't contain himself. I think just that, the thought of a prime minister who isn't white just riles him so much that he could not contain his anger. I mean, I think there was an episode of Loose Women, wasn't there? I mean, this is just a TV program, right? And it had, I think it was an all black cast, 4 black women or some women of color. And the tweets that came out, that were racist and just so rude and negative, I was in shock. Things like, what was it? I think it was an advert on TV. Was it the Argos advert that featured a black family?
Sainsbury's, Last Christmas.
Was it? That was it. Sorry, I stand corrected. The outrage. How dare we have a black family on the TV? Have we gone mad? It's just racism at its best. And I'm just not surprised anymore. The narrow-mindedness, ignorance of these people just never surprises me anymore. I'm quite used to it.
Thanks, Karen.
I'd heard that clip existed, and I'd purposely avoided it. But I don't know where that is. But I had, after listening to it, I had a really visceral reaction to that. heart rate's up, muscles are tense. So I'm trying to figure out what that is, and I think I feel threatened, and I think maybe somehow that's what it is for him, for this caller as well. There's a sense of threat there. Can't explain it. Don't know necessarily why or what. I don't know him, but it also makes me question. I mean, I'm second generation. My kids are born here. We contribute to the country. Educated here. What do I have to do in that case? To prove my worth, to prove my loyalty. What do I have to do? Yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, that was tough to hear. And interesting that you felt threatened and frightened. It is frightening, actually. But what do you think Jerry's frightened of? He's white, cishet, I imagine, English, male. What do they have to be frightened of?
Yeah, it's $1 million question, isn't it?
No, I think it is. I think it's change. I think people are afraid of change. When something is different, I think it causes panic. And what people don't realize is that, they might say it's changing the face of our country or the culture, but culture changes. That is something that is ever evolving and ever changing. Nothing stays the same. And people are afraid of that. Something changes. It doesn't look the way it did in the 50s, and people panic because people like consistency. People like, there's comfort, isn't there, in everything staying the same. So, I mean, when my parents came over in the Windrush, that was, my goodness, there were signs on the door. It said no Irish, no blacks, and no dogs, I think. All lumped in the same category. And, my parents had to, live through that. And they were invited. So it's change. People don't like change. All of a sudden, the face of the country was changing. And people are threatened and frightened, I think, of change.
And people don't like addressing their own issues or facing up to their own demons, if you like.
Considering how frightened they seem to be of change, and I agree, it's ironic then that this group of people felt the need to go to every country on God's green earth, draw a line, decide to claim it, stamp a flag on it, terrorize every other nation on this earth, and then put visas in place for people to get to and from on God's green earth, and yet they're frightened.
Neutralize the threat.
Yeah. They should be frightened in the sense that if they were to get back from Indigenous and Black and brown people what they did to us, yeah, I'd be frightened too, because they couldn't take it. Sarah.
So I think everyone's made some really good points here. I didn't feel shocked about it. Tell you why. So one of the places I've worked in, that shall not be named, there was a hell of a lot of racism, and outwardly so, by certain people. So this kind of comment was normal. This was normal. It got so bad that it was daily for people. People would be called all sorts of nasty names every single day. And it was just, in the end, it was ruled out that this particular place was a racist place. And that's just how it was. And I think that's really sad, actually, that it was kind of accepted as a racist place, because that's not right. It became known as just a racist place to be, which is not something that I want to ever have to be part of. Well, not part of, but ever have to be in the same location as people with those kind of thoughts. So what Jerry was saying was very normalized in the place that I used to work in. People would openly say what they thought about other cultures. So I'm not shocked. The only thing I was shocked at by what Jerry said is the link to Al-Qaeda. I thought I'm not so shocked that he was such an ignorant dick. Sorry, I'm just going to say it. I'm not so shocked that he was such an ignorant dick. Sorry, listeners, but I don't know how else to put it. But
Yeah.
I am disgusted, actually, that he, voiced that. And I just think, what does that, I mean, the classic, what does that say about him? So I think what Karen was saying about people not wanting change, I think that's right. They don't. I mean, my grandmother, who passed away about 2 years ago, when she used to go to school on horse and cart, and now look how we take our kids to school. So if people don't like change, would they like to go back with my granny and ride a horse and cart to school in the rain? Yeah, you don't like change? Do you want to do that every morning? How about that? So, you don't like change, but you don't want a horse and cart, but you want the latest iPhone. You want flip phone. So I think people are scared. I think people are also kind of worried that, maybe somebody that's different than, than the typical, well, Boris obviously wasn't born here, was he? But the typical, what they say as British white man, maybe someone would be bringing some different qualities and possibly, my God, some better ones? Oh my God, then what would that say for that person? If someone was running something, what would that say for that racist caller? If the person actually excelled at the job, my God, that would make them look at themselves, wouldn't it? Or
No,
maybe
they'd
not.
still hate it. They would still think there's a white man who could do the
better.
same, and maybe even better.
But also, I think what's a bit crazy also, they're making, they don't know Boris Johnson. Unless Boris Johnson is, say, their dad or their cousin or, I don't know, someone in their family. And even then, they don't personally know Boris. They know what he presents in the media, what he presents on TV. We don't even know if Boris even does love this country, So
we have evidence that he does not.
Well, there you go. Isn't that something? Country. I mean, Boris is doing a job, right? Boris is presenting himself in a certain way, like we all present in a certain way. Okay, so they don't know that Boris does love this country. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I just think it's the times we live in. It's a shame, really, that this guy had to present himself as such an ignorant idiot. Really, I personally don't listen to this kind of stuff too much because I find it quite low vibe and it just makes me angry. So I try and kind of be aware of it, but steer away from it because it just brings me down and it makes me angry and I want to start swearing and that's not good. So yeah, that's my view on it, guys.
Yeah. So Byline Times, I follow them on Twitter, real journalism. They don't make the news, they report the news, very intelligent journalism. They wrote an article in connection with the idea that Jerry's put it out there that, you can only be prime minister if you're white and blah, blah, blah. Now, Karen, do you remember episode 2 when we talked about what a black person sounds like? And you mentioned a research that said black people was it smaller brains or something like that? So I think I might have found something in this article about it. So this article quotes Charles Murray. He's an American sociologist, one of the world's pioneers of scientific racism and biological theories of IQ. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, he's a white nationalist extremist who uses racist pseudoscience and misleading statistics to argue that social inequality is caused by genetic inferiority of the Black and Latino communities, women, and the poor. His 1994 book, The Bell Curve, Intelligence and Class Structure in American Life, co-authored with Richard Herrnstein, has been described by the Scientific American magazine as the flagship modern work reporting on racial differences in IQ. The book claims that Black people, women, the poor, and Latinos are cognitively inferior, largely due to hereditary genetic factors, and that rises in their birth and immigration rates therefore explains the rise in inequality between racial and social groups. That theory is, interestingly, his research was funded by a Nazi eugenics foundation. Say no more. But there it is. We found something. It's a long article. Read it at your pleasure. But yeah, So imagine then that this is put over as, see, now we have proof. And interestingly, they include the poor. And I would love to know how you've grouped the poor into this idea that we're cognitively inferior because we're poor. I have a headache.
What about people who've lost wealth? Are they cognitively inferior also? That doesn't make sense, does it? But that is the article. It was called the bell curve. Yes, it was. That was the article. And actually, like I say, the sections of that were actually introduced at uni. I sat on a course through a lecture, and we did discuss that. So,
No, those kind of people. I bet that kind of man is the kind of man that probably secretly loves, women of color, loves Latino women, but I talk about the poor. But it's just ridiculous to me. It's absolutely mind-bendingly just stupid, And what about, people that have made billions, people of color that made, so they're totally stupid, are they? That have built businesses up from, oh, yeah, I have nothing else to say about this, people. This is just awful and horrible.
the problem is, though, is that most of our research, our philosophers are Eurocentric, aren't they? They are white, middle class people. That's what's scary to me.
You mean the ones that made it into the textbook, Karen, because they existed before?
Absolutely. But I'm saying what we are taught when we enroll on a course at university, we're doing our degrees, whatever. These are the research papers that we are given. This is what we have access to.
Very
and this
true.
is what we expect us to use.
Very
yes,
true.
Of course, we've written lots of things as Black people, but that's not what is accepted. That's not what they want in their reference list.
You're right, though. When I was at uni, even if I went downstairs now, my therapy books, everything's written by an older white man.
Yeah.
That's who it's written by. From years and years and eons ago. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. The bell curve, there you have it. If you want to raise your blood pressure.
I think I've had enough of that already.
Yeah, thank you. I won't add it to my Audible list, Karen.
Please don't.
No,
please don't.
I won't. It's all right.
But you can understand how people like Jerry got to the point where they thought that, like I said, he called in the radio show and he thought it was okay to say that. Am I British? By naturalization, yes. But my children who are born here, I don't know. They need a passport of another color, I think, because there is probably going to come a time when if you're not white, you're not British, therefore you can't stay here. So that was what in the world. Is that
I want
fine
to
for you, Sarah?
plane to Ghana straight away. Thanks. It's cool.
Listen.
In my flight, take my family, I'm gone. Bye.
Same. I have no hesitation in leaving Babylon. This is bare madness. And yeah, I can't participate. So I am now going to move on to introduce our guest tonight. So this is Sameer. You heard his lovely voice earlier. Sameer is a integrative counselor and psychotherapist working with adults and adolescents in private practice and agency. He is interested in parenting and how our childhood experiences influence self-esteem, confidence, and relationships. He aims to help people grow through raised self-awareness and understanding. Now, I work with Sameer, so I know him personally, and he is just, a pure soul. That's the only way I can describe. He is a pure soul. He has passion for this work, deeply, deeply committed to. And so that's why I thought it'd be so wonderful to have him on, ladies, to continue a series on men's mental health and to explore a little further, maybe actually, Sameer, around parenting and how our childhood experiences have influenced us today. Somehow women have gotten the memo that we can go to therapy, that it is expected or acceptable that at some points our mental health will deteriorate and we can get help. And it seems like that has not translated to our men. So where would you like to start? Ladies, do you have any question for Sameer? Or Sameer, do you want to go right ahead and get into it?
I'm just going to say thank you for such a warm welcome. You've got my heart going again, but in a different way this time. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sameer, can you so we understand, or so I understand, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into becoming a counsellor and psychotherapist? I always find it fascinating as a fellow professional to find out how we all came into this. So would you be so kind as to tell us that to begin with, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
We've all got our stories, haven't we? So for me, my, I suppose, big life event that made me question everything was an illness and subsequent passing of a loved one. And it just led me to think about lots of different things, one of which was what's led me to this point so far. Where do I want to go in the future? What's I started questioning a lot about purpose, actually, in life. And amongst all of those thoughts, I got to looking at my relationships with my own parents, how they were influenced culturally, and how that led me to my personality traits, my self-esteem, my confidence in life, and all of these things for me are linked to purpose. If you have if your self-esteem is strong, if your confidence is strong, you can go out and find that purpose. So for me, I had to build or rebuild all of that before thinking, right, what do I want to do? I want to, my background was in business development, in corporate and small businesses. So I thought, well, what is it that I loved about all of that? People. Fundamentally, why do they make decisions that they do? What influences them? And I thought, well, if I can, and I'd also done things like mentoring for young people during my career up until then. So firstly, I decided to study teaching because I love young people and wanted to mentor them some more. But last minute, I thought to myself, no, can't do teaching. I don't want to get caught up in all the paperwork. I want to be much less about what they're learning and more about how they impact the world. Again, confidence, self-esteem. So counselling and psychotherapy it was. Really long answer to a relatively simple question, so I apologise. But yeah, that's sort of the story as it is now up until today.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Karen, did you want to ask anything?
I'm just interested in your work, so day to day, who are your clients? Do you work with, is it predominantly young people? Is it adults? Can you just
absolutely. Yeah. So predominantly it's adults. So I work with young people at the moment through the agency. So young people who are looked after, and invariably they've had some kind of traumatic experiences, difficult family histories. So I really want to get under the skin of what's gone on for them and how they can, the earlier the intervention in life, the better your chances moving forward. So I love that work. I'm starting to bring some more of that into private practice. One of the things about therapy for me was that I, as you might expect, sought therapy when I was going through the challenges that I was going through at the time. And I had a really good experience, an incredible, well, frankly, I think life-changing experience. It sounds a bit cliche, but no, it was for me. And it made me realize a lot of things about the way that I've been brought up. So one of the things for me was that I wanted to work with more South Asian men and women, because therapy isn't the done thing. And I'm now finding, thankfully, that I'm having I've got more and more South Asian men, which I'm really pleased about, particularly pleased about, men and women approaching me in private practice. So at the moment, it's not quite where I'd want it to be in terms of proportion, but it's getting there, which I'm so pleased about. One of the things that a colleague of mine and I did earlier this year was there was lots going around on social media about suicide incidents amongst South Asian men. And there's all this talk about we need to raise awareness, and that's fantastic. That's fundamentally, my work as a therapist is to help people raise self-awareness. But the other part of it is, okay, now the awareness is there, what are we going to do about it? Mm-hmm. So to that end, we ran a 10-week support group. We piloted a 10-week support group for South Asian men. It was genuinely eye-opening and fantastic. We had people with common cultures, common themes around family and culture coming together and just laying it all on the table, and they were forming bonds after the 10 weeks. And I think one of the things around, men's mental health and traumatic life experiences is a sense of community. And that's what we, in our small way, set out to build. The results were fantastic.
How did you engage them, Sameer? Sorry to interrupt, but I'm so curious. How did you engage them?
It was tough. We put out some social media posts on Instagram and Facebook. We had lots of people saying, this is great. I'd really love to be on this. And I had initial calls with everyone that ended up joining the group for the 10 weeks and didn't in a lot of cases as well. Some people just felt too vulnerable to come into a group and talk about their challenges. So it was hard to engage. I mean, we had a lot of women saying, I'm going to pass this to my brother. I'm going to pass this to my husband. I'm going to, share this with, my son, even in some cases. But the engagement from men themselves was tough to get. We managed to get, I think we were aiming for 12, but we ended up getting, I think, 9 or 10 that did the whole 10 weeks, which was fantastic. But even just to get that, tough gig.
Yeah.
Tough gig.
Yeah. What you've said is so interesting. And I'm so impressed by the work you've been able to do with that community, because I think that there are pockets of society, there are communities that do find it very, very difficult to seek help and to talk about what they're going through. I think that it can be, a stigma attached to, opening up and talking about your difficulties. I think for some families, for some individuals, they're taught resilience, and that you don't say that actually you're struggling, or you don't talk about certain things. So I think the work you're doing is absolutely invaluable. I wanted to ask something about where you're from. Are you also South Asian? Do you think it was helpful then that you could identify with these individuals because of your cultural background, perhaps? Do you think that played some part?
Yeah, definitely. So I am South Asian. I'm originate from the Punjab region of India. And yes, 100%. Even in my therapy work at the moment, I've had lots of men say, look, we have tried therapy before, but it didn't last as long as we perhaps needed it to, because there wasn't really a cultural fit. There's nuances that need to be understood, particularly around parent-child relationships.
100%.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying, it just resonated with me, because my place of work, I work in a school, and the pastoral team are amazing. They really, it's very child-centered, and they are really trying to support, you know, and maintain good mental health and emotional well-being for the children in our care. However, there is a cultural disparity. There is. And so I do work a lot with parents who are of colour, because even though my colleagues are very good at what they do, there are nuances, there are differences, there are things that I don't believe my colleagues understand or know how to address. I just think there are misconceptions, or, you know, there's just that lack of understanding. And it's very difficult for me sometimes to approach that with them. But you know, what we do have lots of conversations about, you know, parents often parent the way they were parented, right? And
Absolutely.
so it's a lot of learnt behavior. And I'm happy to work with parents and show them alternative methods. There are different ways that you can do things, you know. And parents, to be fair, I've been really, really lucky. I've been very, very blessed in this role, and parents tend to warm to me, and I do build really good relationships and I have good rapport with parents. But what you've just said sort of just solidifies the fact that I do believe there needs to be more diversity in this field, because, you know, someone in my family, for example, who I think could possibly benefit, we could all benefit from therapy, myself included, but there's someone I'm thinking of. I think it'd be very difficult for that person to open up to someone who doesn't look like them, hasn't shared their experience, doesn't really get them, doesn't really have an understanding of where they're coming from, or, you know, and their background and things. And I think for that reason, they just haven't sought help. But yeah, I just think, you know, having someone like you in your community that you can actually make a difference, I just think is fantastic.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. Yeah, I mean, it's, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of an example from, you know, culturally speaking, but a lot of it is to do with, you know, responsibility to the family, you know, whereas a therapist might say, well, why do you have so much responsibility to the family? Why can't you just, you know, if your dad's, you know, emotionally abusive, well, say bye-bye then. You know, walk away. You have agency. You can do it. It's not as simple as that. It just isn't, culturally speaking. You cannot just walk away from your family. You have to navigate that in the best way possible. And we can't just, it's never simple. It's never simple.
Sameer, you make some really interesting points, actually, and you were talking then about working with certain groups of people and the men that you have in your study. It got me thinking. I had a long-term client in my last place of work that was a young lady from Bangladesh. Both her parents were born in Bangladesh. I worked with her about 1.5, 2 years. It took about 6 months for the parents to accept the fact that she was even having any counselling. And the rest of the time I saw her, she told me in depth about, you know, how her parents really were not okay about it. And I remember her saying to me, because I was talking to her, saying, you know, when I go, you know, outside of this school, because it was not culturally diverse, that school, would you consider having a Bangladeshi counsellor? And she said, no way, it would never happen. And she said something to me that I found actually quite shocking. She said to me, if I had a Bangladeshi counsellor, they would laugh at me. They'd laugh at my mental health. And I thought, wow, I was actually shocked. She said, ma'am, you would just never find a Bangladeshi counsellor. So I tried with what you would do, but she wasn't having any of it. And again, it was a bit more like you said, that, you know, the dad was quite actually emotionally abusive and more. But like you said, it was so hard for her. It was a bit like she'd been conditioned, even though, yes, okay, like you said, she could have had this, that, the other, you know, early help came in, and that was the worst possible thing. early help because it was a 21-year-old, well, not 21, but an early 20s Caucasian girl that had no idea about a Bangladeshi family. Absolute no idea. So that went down like a lead balloon, and their family were left with nothing again, going around in the same cycle. So yeah, I guess, would you be able to shed some light, Sameer? I mean, on her comment, maybe? Or, I mean, I was so shocked by it. I don't know. I mean, she honestly thought that when I stopped seeing her, she would never, ever, ever be able to find a Bangladeshi counsellor. I don't know. I was just shocked by it.
No, that's really interesting. And I don't know whether this has been from experience. I mean, you said you couldn't find a Bangladeshi counsellor for her, but I wonder if she'd had actual experience of a Bangladeshi counsellor
laughing at her.
I find that shocking if that has happened. I think part of it is how we sell the profession to people. People don't realize that there's confidentiality. People don't realize that there's we don't pass judgment on people. We just try and understand what their experience is. And if we're from a similar background, then we can probably more closely identify with that. But as far as laughing or ridiculing someone for something that they've been through, I mean, that's just fundamentally wrong, isn't it?
It is. It might have been the dad. Yeah, it might have been the dad and things like that. But I was just surprised. Right. And she did say that, it would be very unusual, to find a counsellor within her own community. And I was just thinking for you and, the men that you see, is it unusual? I mean, is it unusual to find a gentleman like yourself doing this work?
There aren't many of us around. I have to say that I think there are, to be fair, lots of people they're well-intentioned, doing lots of good work, I think. But as far as people, taking the qualifications, undergoing the training, doing the work on themselves that we need to do, I think we're few and far between, which is a shame. I mean, on my cohort, I was the only South Asian male. I was one of, I believe it was 3 men out of my cohort of about 25. So it's men firstly, but then, we are even a rarer breed in this profession. And as far as maybe being ridiculed by her father, and obviously I don't want to talk any more about her specifically, your client specifically, but I'm trying to think about whether I told my father that I'd sought therapy, and actually I don't think I did.
Right.
I don't think I did. I don't think I have to this day, even though he's managed to get round or get his head around the fact that I've retrained and now I help people with their well-being and emotions and challenges. I think he's finally got his head around it, which is, bless him. It's not easy to do. But I don't. Yeah, he's never asked me, and I've never told him. So there's a revelation.
Very interesting.
A few people are going to hear. But yeah, and I think, look, it's I think the first thing is this sense of community, that you keep things within the community. You don't go externally. You don't, seeking help. No, you've got God.
Yes, you do.
Say prayer. And you do. Absolutely, you have God. But the thing is, just for me, I'm not especially religious, I have to be honest, but spiritually, I think you have to walk forward in order for the universe to move towards you. I think that's just how I think.
I agree. Taking action, inspired action.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yes, God is there, the universe, the life force, whatever you want to call it, is there. but you have to seek help for yourself.
Of course.
You know,
and my answer nowadays is, I'm a Christian. I shouldn't need help. I've prayed about it. God is going to help me. I'm just, he sent me. Now let's do it.
I haven't
Because if you're
used that
expecting him
one.
to come down, he's not. He sent me.
I haven't used that one, but I think, that's wonderful. I'm going to try that one.
Go for it.
Do you know the other thing? The other thing I found so far about with men, and I'm not sure that it's just South Asian men, but this is my experience so far, is people reading about things like stoicism. It's a really interesting philosophy, and I've read. I think one of them is Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. I think it's great stuff, but it does feed into this thing about what is it to be a man. Man and stoic are synonymous, but actually, where for me at least, this falls down is we are emotional beings. So yes, some parts of stoicism, you can only look at what you can control. Yep, absolutely. You want to be able to respond to situations in the best possible way. I get all of that, but we can't just park emotions. And that's what people think they can do. And they've tried to do. They've tried to outthink all of the stuff that they're going through. And they've come to, my office room, and I just can't do this anymore. I can't outthink this. My family just tell me to get on with it or get married. You'll be fine. But how are you supposed to do that if you don't know who you are? If you haven't dealt with things that have obviously affected you, you just can't. Same with being a parent. Was I ready to be a parent? No, absolutely not. I'm learning now. And I'm seeing traits of my own father as I parent my kids. But the difference is, because I recognize this now, I can wind it back and say, okay, right, where do I need to get to now? How do I need to respond to this situation? But you can't outthink your way from this. You have to get in touch with that emotional side of things. And we as men find that incredibly difficult. When my grandfather, my dad's dad, passed on, my dad, at least in front of me, barely shed a tear. And he loved his dad. He looked up to his dad. His dad was on a pedestal for him. Barely shed a tear. What he did in the comfort of his own room, I don't know. But that was never shared with me. So, how do I grieve? So we're not taught these things, or at least in my experience, I have to say, wasn't taught these things. And just from what I'm seeing from the South Asian men that I work with, it continues, unfortunately. Yeah. So it's a part of my... Sorry, Karen, you were going to say?
No, finish your sentence, please. Part of your...
Yeah. So part of my work is to help them to access that, and realize that they've been taught in a certain way, and they need to try and backtrack a little bit, unlearn some stuff, and relearn and move a different direction in the way they are in relationships and in the world. Yeah.
My question is the same question I asked our guest I met a few weeks ago. At what age did you realize that there was that link between stoicism and maleness, what it means to be a man? Do you remember? Is there an age when you can go, that's the age at which I stopped crying or stopped showing my emotional needs? Or was it gradual?
Oh, such a good question. It was young. I know it was young. I don't think I can pinpoint quite when. It must have been around 10 years old. maybe slightly earlier, 8 to 10 years old. Actually, it was around that period. There was something going on, which it's in my mind now, but it's needless to say, it was very, very upsetting. Was my voice heard? I didn't feel like it was. Was I crying a lot? Yes, I was. I was actually told, okay, no, things are going to go in a certain way. We're not going to do anything you don't want to happen. But then the exact opposite happened. So what was the point of my tears? What was the point of me expressing myself and my wishes and how I wanted things to go? What was the point? Not going to be listened to anyway. So your family say jump and you say yes, how high?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the messages you got about masculinity was quite young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just got to get on with it, deal with it.
Wow.
That's life, kiddo.
And would you say that that you've observed, obviously it's anecdotal, that the women are given the same messages in your community? Get on with it. Don't show emotion. It is what it is.
Yeah, interesting one. I think they are given more space. In some cases, and I don't want to speak too much about this. It's not really my my area of expertise, but I think that yes, in some instances, it is just get on with it. But I think they are given more space,
right,
to talk about things generally. But I think women. I don't want to generalize, but I think women find it easier to talk within amongst their friend circles, amongst, even with, they're within other women in the community, they can talk about stuff. Men, what would we do? We would go down to the pub, have a few drinks. And I've done a lot of that, I have to say. To the pub, a few drinks, let's go out, and just distance ourselves from it all. It'll be all right tomorrow.
Right.
It'll be fine tomorrow.
So when Karen, Sarah, and I go to the pub, which we do when we have the time, we talk. We don't put it to one side and forget it's happening. We
never do
talk.
that.
Yeah.
No.
We never ever. I can't imagine burying that. I think as mental health professionals, I know if someone asked me, like, "How are you doing today?" If I wasn't having a good day, I'd be like, "Well, I'm digging myself out of a pit of anxiety today, but I'm almost there." I'll just be real.
No, for me it would be I'm doing really well. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Oh wow.
Whereas actually, no. I need to talk. I'm really struggling.
Do men do that, Sameer? Do men ever go for a drink and say, "You know what? I'm struggling, really struggling today, actually"?
Not in my experience.
Right.
Wow.
No, not in my experience. It's only.
What do you talk about then?
Yeah, what do you talk about? Must be very boring.
Rubbish. Absolute rubbish. No, we might talk about music. We might not even talk. We might just keep drinking into oblivion.
Wow.
So again, I don't do much of that now, because I'm a lot further than I was. But yeah, in my experience, prior to sort of growing as much as I have in life, I think, a lot of it was just that. Let's just go out, let's get wasted, and that's it.
Push it to the back of the brain somewhere.
Absolutely. It's too hard to deal with. Don't want to deal with it.
For some people, I think they're taught resilience. So, for example, I was talking to a young girl at work, and her parents had both lost their parents to the Rwandan genocide. So she was quite emotional about something, and she went to her dad and, was trying to express this. And she said, there just wasn't that space that she could express what she was going through. And she said that was just one example. She said she's found that as a young child, she's sort of been taught that you just get on with it, don't shed any tears. And I think for her parents, because they'd gone through this absolute, awful time, such an atrocity, I think that they have learned to be resilient, and therefore they've passed it on to their daughter or their children, because they think that's the only way you can cope. You can't break down, you can't ask for help, you can't cry, there will be difficulties in life and you need to push through. And I think what I find is that is a difficult balance for a lot of people. Resilience is really, really important, and you do have to push through. Lots of the young people I work with, I explain that yes, you can, be anxious, and yes, you can have difficulties. And there'll be days when your mood will be low. However, we do need to try and use coping strategies to push through those difficult times. But also, you do need to talk about it, and you need to be able to express that you're going through this, and we need to normalize this. So what I'm saying is it's a balance, isn't it? Right? And sometimes we don't get that balance quite right.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think one of the things that I sometimes say to my clients is that you have to wallow in the mess. And I've put it a bit more podcast friendly. I've said it in a more podcast friendly way, but you have to wallow in the mess for a while. But if you wallow in it too long, then I'll come and pull you out, because you can't be in there for an indefinite period of time. You have to walk. You have to move forward.
That's right.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
That's one of the things over the years that clients have said probably the most to me, that if I start crying, I'm never going to stop. Or I'm afraid if I open up this aspect of my life, I will be out of control, I will be annihilated, and I can't cope. Neither of which is true, because you've got this far. That means you do have some resilience, and there are some coping strategies, and something gets you out of the bed enough to come to therapy. But the fear is there nevertheless. If I talk about this thing, it will destroy me, it will eat me up. And I do wonder if men, if you think of that young age group, 10 and maybe under, that you've learned what it means to be a man, you're still a boy. Where's the space to be a boy? Then you have been bottling up for so long that by the time you get to your early 20s, we see a lot of drunkenness, a lot of antisocial behavior, drug use goes up, because you're not wired to not feel. That it's just not possible to not feel. And if you keep it all in your head, you will go mad. So I now understand, Sarah and Karen, why when we are at the pub, men are the airwig to the point, Sameer, we can see them literally taking the words out of our mouth.
Well, that was funny. The two guys on the table. Remember that? Leaning in.
Yeah, they weren't even pretending not to listen. They were like that to hear our conversation. I wonder then if in teaching young men, the next generation, it's over for some of us, but the next generation, your sons, our sons, how to be emotionally stable and healthy, if we can remove that pressure from them to be resilient as an adult, whilst they're still boys and their brains are still developing, and we're giving them real adult concepts to deal with. As children, it's not fair. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah. And I think we have to remember as well that boys, men, they will do things in different ways. They like to. I mean, it's very difficult for men to face each other and sit there talking. If they're out playing football, golf, bit of rough and tumble, whatever they're doing, and the conversation comes out, I think that's easier. I mean, even working one-to-one with clients, it can take ages for people to build enough trust. I mean, when the trust builds, I've been humbled by seeing, grown men, really, the typical, what you'd associate with a man, big and strong, break down in tears. But that is, I'm not a man. If I do that, what are my mates going to think? I couldn't do that outside of this room. I'd be weak. And actually, what are the women in my life going to think? Can we handle that?
So if they're not a man, what are they? In that moment, they're sitting with you. They've gotten in touch with something really painful and they're crying. Yeah. If they're not a man in that moment, what have they become?
Weak.
So still a man, just a weak man.
Still a man, just a weak man.
Right.
Yeah.
Sameer, let me throw in a mix how it is of yourself as a male therapist, then counselling or giving therapy to a man. How does that differ, do you think, or from say one of us giving counselling or therapy to a man? Do you think it's probably easier for a man to have therapy with a man, or what's your thoughts on a woman giving therapy to a man? Because obviously you have that whole dynamic, don't you, of the things that are unsaid in the room. Possibly if the man is straight, would you make a quicker breakthrough as a man giving therapy to a man? Do you think? What do you think?
Quite. It's a great question. Quite possibly, because already I think there's a connection there that maybe this man has been where I've been at some point. Or gets it, so that there's already a layer taken off there, I think. But also, I just thinking about my own work. I'd like to think I'm, nurturing and attentive and responsive as we should be, as good therapists. But at the same time, I can be very direct in session. If someone's skirting around something, then I suppose man to man, if you like, I can just say, no, just look, what is this? Whereas I don't know if certain female therapists might not be as direct or able to be that direct. I can't give a complete answer to that question, I don't think. But at least from my practice, I think that I can strike that balance with a man of, look, if they break down and cry, I'm there. I'm not trying to fix it. I am holding you. But at the same time, if I need to tell you a home truth as I see it, I'll tell you. And I think in my experience, men appreciate that to a degree. Like, oh, okay, right. I didn't even see that. Definitely.
I'm very direct as well in my sessions with my clients. I'm a very direct person. I think there is a time, isn't there, for therapeutic holding, and there's a time to tell a person a home truth that they needed to have been told in order for them to grow. And you said, wallowing in stuff in order to move forward with one's life. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm also quite direct in my work. I'm gentle with it, but you guys know me outside of the podcast. I am not one for sugarcoating anything. I like sugar too much. I'll eat it. But, if a client is dancing around an issue, I will gently say, what are we doing here? What are we avoiding? What are we not talking about in this space? But I don't, the wallowing, please do wallow in the brown stuff. You have to feel it and then heal from it. But to get the men into the room in the first place, I have found, I don't know about you, Sarah, it's difficult. And even to come on the podcast, we've been trying to get a Black male. We have not succeeded.
No, we have had many conversations with people, and those people, seem up for it at the time, and then shock horror, they can't, or they just dissolve to the wallpaper.
I think, sorry to cut you, Sarah, apologize.
Okay.
I think a lot of it is what other people think. I think that's a large
Absolutely.
part of it. It's so difficult to be able to be honest and open when you are open to be judged by other people. What will someone else think of my journey? What will they think of my pain? What will they think of what I've gone through? How will they perceive me? How will they see me? How does, will that diminish my place now in society, or with my peers? How will my peers view me? I think that's a large part of it. And I think as women, because we're quite used to, I don't know, sharing what we've gone through, and a lot of our experiences are quite shared. So I can come to you and I can say, oh my goodness, Kay, this happened, or Sarah, and we can share in that. But I think for some people, being honest and open, not knowing if they will be held, I guess they don't know that, do they? All right, in therapy, even then, I just think getting it out, from your head out, saying it out loud that you have a problem. I think for a lot of people, that's really scary. Admitting that you have a problem is a big deal.
Karen, I think you're right. And I often say to people, I hear what you're saying. Your concerns are, what will people think? I'm more interested in what you think. What do you think about the experiences you've been through? Let's start there. What other people think about you is none of your business.
But
and if you can go on.
Sorry, what I was going to say is, but coming on a platform like this, where they are sharing that, I think that's quite scary for a lot of people.
I agree. Because for one-to-one therapy, you could just say to your mates, I'm going to the gym, and come for a session. How are they going to know? But on the podcast, I suppose they're a little bit more exposed.
Yeah. And I think that's quite hard for some people. We're open, we can.
I was thinking again about the points that you were making before, about how Sarah and Karen, you're both very direct, and you can be in therapy. So then that got me thinking, well, okay, then what is it about the male thing? Can I make quicker breakthroughs? And this is going to sound incredibly superficial, but the number of male clients that have commented on my physical appearance, the beard specifically, I wonder if that plays into it, that you've got I look a certain way. You could argue that a beard is very masculine.
Beard envy, Sameer. They're thinking about you combing it,
beard envy,
moisturising it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're thinking about the weekend, Sameer. They're thinking about you combing it.
And what beard oil you use.
That's it. They're wondering. They're wondering about the aftershave you might use behind the beard. That's what I'm wondering about.
That's a whole other podcast right there. But yeah, so I wonder if it's something about that as well, that it creates a sense of safety as well in that way, because you could say that I'm a man, I have a beard, I present myself in a certain way, and I can be vulnerable, therefore you can be vulnerable in my presence, and that's okay. Maybe. I don't know, but yeah, because the whole me being direct, that argument was blown out of the water by you two. So I thought, what else could it be? Don't know, maybe.
So, Sameer, let me ask you, what advice would you give for one of our listeners working with their husband, who might not working with, okay, rewind, that's their husband's not working with them, but trying to encourage maybe a husband or a son or a partner to be more forthcoming with their emotion? What advice would you give for a woman about that? Tips, please.
I would make time for it. Make time for it and be ready to hold it. Be ready to hold it. It's because I think, personally speaking, for a man to be that vulnerable in front of a woman, especially, a wife, girlfriend, it's not natural, because we're the providers. What's emotion? No, You do the emotion. I'll look after you. I'll carry you. So just be prepared to hear it. And I think it's a process. I think as hard as it is, somehow let them know every day that it's okay. And if it's not okay for you, just try and understand why not. What's your expectation of the man in your life? You know? And if you're not able to handle it, then why not just confront that first? Because I can imagine it can be, it might be quite hard to see, a man that you have certain expectations. We all have expectations, don't we? So a man that you have expectations of, talking about emotions and even breaking down and crying. You know?
I remember seeing my dad crying. Something happened about 3 years ago, and I've only seen my dad cry twice in his life. Once when his mother died, I was young, and then I saw my dad cry about 3 years ago. It made me cry. So when I've seen my mum cry, I don't cry, because let's say it's normalised, isn't it? I mean, talk to my mum or I cry, whatever. But see my dad cry, that took a piece of my heart. It really did.
Yeah, you don't expect it.
No, not from an 80-year-old man. You know, and you're right about the whole provider thing. I think it's just very difficult, isn't it, for men sometimes? They kind of, I know in my life, men I've met have kind of gone back and forth. Sometimes they've started to say something and then they've kind of swallowed back their words again. Or they seem to go very, very quiet. Is that kind of a normal thing, Sameer, when they're working out stuff in their head? Radio silence. Then they bounce back again.
Yeah, the default that I've experienced with men, including myself, obviously, is shut down or intense effing rage. That I can't control this thing. What is going on? You know, I need to sort this out. I need to problem solve. That's men.
Oh, that's again,
Men solve problems.
Yeah.
You know, I can't dwell in this stuff for too long because I need to get out of it and I need to solve something. Then I'll feel worthy.
But even that message is skewed and distorted because generalization here incoming, men create more problems than they solve. Look, what are you solving? Without the emotional literacy and fortitude, what can you possibly solve? How is short term? This is why we go to war, because men won't go to therapy. I've heard that said, and I think it's true. They'd rather fight wars than go to therapy. For God's sake. I find a man who doesn't show his emotions absolutely terrifying. It chills my blood. That is a no-go for me. I don't find the whole idea of a man who is strong and stoic and doesn't feel. No, that terrifies me. That is not something I want to be close to, because it shuts me down. Because I'm thinking, if you can't even manage your own feelings and hold them, what are you going to do with mine? You're either going to mock them, shame them, or intellectualize them away. So I think men have been confused. I do think men have received confusing messages about masculinity.
I've had male clients walk into therapy and their whole aura is, I'm fighting. I'm literally going to go to war here. And my response to that invariably has been, okay, you can do that. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not here to fight you. So you can keep carrying all that armor that you're carrying that's holding you together. But it's heavy. See where it gets you in the future. You know? So yeah, the war thing, that made me think of some of the stuff that clients come in with. It's hard work. Hard work for them, obviously. Yeah.
I think it's worrying, the men I've come across in my life, when they're so in kind of war mode. I feel that their fathers are in war mode, and no doubt the grandfathers were probably in war mode. That I feel like they get, like someone will get stuck in a cycle of grief. Well, they get stuck in war mode. And I don't know how they get out of it. If they're not willing to go to therapy, how would they ever get out of it? Because it feels like they cannot. They are so deeply entrenched in this war mode. they're almost like stone. I don't know. I don't know if that's a question for anybody really. I just I don't know what help they can have if they're stuck in war mode.
I have met a couple of men like that who just have not gone past whatever the trauma was. They've never dealt with it, spoken about it, never sought help. So they just go through life being very angry. And that cannot be healthy for anyone. It can't be healthy for them, for their partners, families. But yeah, I think you're right. I think if you don't ever deal with that, grief, pain, whatever it is, it's so hard to move forward.
It will deal with you if you don't deal with it. In the end.
I was just thinking that, yeah,
100%.
something has to give.
Yeah.
Whether it's physical health, whether it's your relationships just fall apart, whether it's you'll always be told by, you know, the life force, Mother Nature, whatever you want to call it, you'll be told that you have to address this somehow, you know. So you can't force people into help, can you?
You can't. But I'm thinking then, what is our role as women in supporting men? And I'm really going to go back to the youngest. When you have a son as a woman, what messages do you pass on to your son about his emotional well-being? Are you raising him like your dad was? Are you raising him based on cultural norms that say he shouldn't feel? You don't have to answer, ladies. It's a statement I'm going to make, okay? And you might have had similar experience, but men who I've dated, particularly ex-soldiers, who also have PTSD, their way of coping seems to be through sex. And if you've ever had angry sex, at a point you're like, oh my God, you realize you're not making love. You're not even part of the equation.
You're not even in the room, Karen, at that point.
You're not in the room.
You're not.
They're trying to screw away their trauma. And it's not nice. I think they think if a woman says, come over and blow my back out, that's what she means. It is not. Because now I'm like, oh God, what is happening here? But they've tried that for centuries and centuries. So maybe as women, we kind of need to take a step back and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's talk before we get there. What is going on? Because you can feel the tension in someone's body. And we're not just here to be as Hema would say, a coffin or a receptacle for people's unprocessed rage and trauma. We are more than that. So I'm now thinking, listening to you, Sameer, that perhaps my responsibility in relationships is also to make it safe for my partner whenever he arrives, to be himself, be emotional, open up your heart, have a different lived experience. It can't just be all tough, hench, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to lift 120 kilos, but then you can't sit and tell me that I'm doing something that irritates you. That is not attractive.
No, I think that the physical component is incredibly important. You know, of course it is. They've got to go to the gym and get hench and do all that stuff. They have to, right? It's part of what being, I think it's part of what being a man is, but it feeds into that protector notion. But yeah, you can sometimes just drop all that. And it's okay to drop all that. I don't think we're going to fundamentally take away what it is because it's really confusing being a man. You know, especially for the younger generation now, what on earth is going on, right? So there are some things that just, I think, have to be. They just have to be. But yes, if we encourage safe spaces, as you're saying, and look, the parenting thing is so important as well. You know, dads have to be open to these conversations as much as mums. I think you can't have a mum saying, "Oh, you know, man up."
No.
Obviously, a dad saying it is different, and a mum saying it's different. You know,
nobody should say it. No, you're a child. You don't need to be a man.
No, 100%, 100%. But you know, even these expectations of mums and their sons, you know, oh, we're we're worried that one of the things I've thought of it actually, just on that note, is one of the biggest insults that, culturally speaking, that you could say at the time to a man was, go wear some bangles.
Ooh.
Yeah, go
Ooh.
wear some bangles.
You're basically calling him a woman.
Yeah. What you can't
Ouch.
do with that? Go wear some bangles.
Maybe you should wear some bangles and then you could deal with it. This is what I love about Gen Z.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Because actually what they do is they remove gender norms. Yeah. This generation, I am pansexual, I'm non-binary. Now then, what you going to do? Tell me to grow up hair, wear some bangles, man up, well, I'm neither male or female, so now what? And maybe that's a more healthy approach to take. Side note, I'd like some bangles.
Yeah, but I think so the point is just let's understand our own expectations as mothers of sons. If I can speak for that, but mothers to their sons, what are the expectations that you have? And partners, what are the expectations I have of my partner?
That's interesting. No, go on, Karen. I cut you.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I have 2 girls. I don't have a son, so I can't speak from personal experience. But I think for some mothers who I've spoken to, they might talk to their boys, young sons. They may not say man up, but I think the thought behind it is that if they go to school, they might be bullied, right? And they don't want that to happen. They don't want their son to appear weak or not be able to defend themselves. So I think from a young age, we do say to our boys, we want you to be strong. We want you to be able to look after yourself, especially the transition to secondary school is quite tough. I want you to be able to go there and be able to handle yourself, look after yourself. So I think there is that element as well. And I think it's with the best will in the world. I think, the intentions are good. However, I think we're missing something there, aren't we? And also I was going to mention about women and partners. I think, well, I'll speak for myself personally. I think it is quite difficult when you have a partner who is experiencing difficulties because, like you say, Kay, we want to be able to hold their grief, give them a safe space where they can be themselves, where they can open up. But I think it can be tricky because you also need this man to still be the king of your castle. You still need him to be that person who... So I think it goes back to what I was saying before. Yes, you need to wallow in your own stuff for a while. But I think it's also knowing when to say, okay, I've got you, I'm holding you. However, you need to come out now. And you need to either seek support for yourself so that you can heal, or we can do it together. But at some point, we do need to move forward. So what I'm trying to say is it's always that balancing act. It's just not that straightforward, is it? It's never sort of one size fits all. I think it's knowing your partner and how to support them. Yeah.
But we do need to give, young men the tools. So it's very well saying to the young person, you were talking about the transition to secondary school. It's fine to say, look, I and well-intentioned that, I just don't want you to be taken advantage of or to be bullied. But what are the tools? The tools are assertiveness. The tools are emotional intelligence. Send them to a martial arts class, which is all about defense, So we need to also equip them with the tools, I think, because saying to someone, again, completely well-intentioned, but it can come across very shaming that, somehow I'm not good enough, or I can't defend myself, or I'm weak, therefore I'm going to get into it with someone at school. So I think it's about the tools as well. It's the understanding and the tools for me. And again, to your point about the king of the castle, yeah, absolutely agree. Look, a man men operate in a different way, and they have these things. We don't want to take that away from them, but at the same time, what is it? Behind every good, successful man is a strong woman. Something like that. I butchered it, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, you've
So
got
what
that
is
right.
so what does the strong woman do? They recognize when their partner needs help and they need to wallow in the stuff. So yeah, I would my 2 cents.
I think also I would say, Sameer, you've mentioned a lot of interesting stuff here, and I know that Karen said about men, and I was working with a young man that mother did exactly that. I said to the ladies earlier, kind of held his hand, looked into his eyes, age 6, and told him, when you go to secondary school, you must never shed a tear. That is weakness, and promise mummy you'll never do that. And she said that to him when he was 5 or 6. He relayed it back to me now. And he said, I feel like breaking inside, but I can never let that promise go to my mother. So it's kind of, even then, he was like 14 at that point. But he went back to that. He said, I was about 5 or 6, and I'll never forget that. He said, she held my hand and she looked into my eyes. So you could say it really locked it in. And I'm sure she had certain intentions to try and protect him, but to see a young man breaking down inside and said, I can't break that promise. It's just a recipe for disaster, isn't it, really?
For poor mental health and maybe a breakdown, Sarah.
Yeah.
Because he's already saying, I feel like I'm breaking.
He was frantic. He was a young man he also was questioning his sexuality, and he was a young man that was from the Central African Republic. Dad would never, ever, and Dad was born and brought up there, moved over here when he was in his 30s, as was Mum. So there's no way that would be accepted. And that was another thing. So there was that. And then also, Sameer, like you said about, I think the way, or Karen said about the way being the king of the castle, I think some education for men also how to talk to women. Because I know if I'm having a bit of a moment, I talk to my partner, he always says, oh, it's okay, sweetheart. And I said, yeah, and I'm like, he said, it's okay. That drives me up the wall. It's like, what's okay? Talk to me. It's like, but it's okay. It's all right. So I think men need a bit of help with that, Sameer. I don't know what you think about that. It wouldn't, trying, but a little bit wouldn't. It doesn't help. It doesn't hold me at all. So,
no.
Yeah. Well, again, look, it's about solving problems. My partner's feeling rubbish. I just want to solve this because I'm the man. You know what? It's okay. I'll put my arm around you. Everything's fine. It's okay. Well,
it's not okay.
It's not okay.
I said that to him. I said, it's not okay. It's really not okay. And he said, it's okay. That's just forget it.
Yeah. But then I just wonder what might have happened if after saying it's not okay because.
Yes, I should have said that.
Maybe, I don't know.
Useful, very useful.
I wonder if it could have helped.
People. Yeah, thank you.
Because again, if you're trying to teach people how to do things, leading by example, right?
Yeah, leading by example. I think men get kind of worried. I know when I was going to cry, he goes, oh, you're going to cry, don't cry. I thought, why? Don't cry for you. Because you
how
might
do
get
I solve that problem?
Crying. Yeah, he's like, oh.
So crying is a problem as well.
Don't cry, please don't.
So just back to your point about teaching boys to defend themselves. I remember when my son was getting bullied in primary school. The school did nothing, and I'm not above fighting a child. I'm putting that out there now. I wanted to go down to the school and bust him up, and the school did nothing. And then we put him in jiu-jitsu, and he learned to defend himself. And he clouted that child once. It never happened again because he could defend himself just once. Now, see, my King Karen. He is soft, he is gentle, but he must know how to clot a man if need be.
Okay.
And then we move on.
This is brilliant. This reminds me and big fan of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, by the way.
Oh, right, nice.
So yeah, it reminds me of a quote. I can't remember where I read it, but it's within kind of Zen philosophy, but it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You should know how to, or one should, know how to defend themselves, conduct themselves, be assertive. But how do you control that? It's controlled danger.
It is controlled danger, and that's where the emotional literacy comes in.
Absolutely.
Because
100%.
one of the disciplines of karate is that you don't fight for the sake of you're idle and you're bored and you want to fight.
Yeah.
You learn to harness that energy and you control it. If we're teaching our young men to also be able to manage their emotions whilst doing the physical, i.e., what is your relationship to anger is a question I ask a lot of my clients, both male and female, because they will do anything but try and not feel angry. Well, why not? Anger is energy. You feel angry because something is wrong. So if I'm saying, what is your relationship to anger? And it's, I don't like to feel it, then you're probably not a warrior. You'll lose your head and you'll get killed. So feel the rage, but control it. Then you can strategize.
Know what to do with it. Yeah.
So if a man get caught, he deserved it.
Yeah.
When you're on mic, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in before we wrap up.
Oh, I just wanted to say it was absolutely lovely meeting you, Sameer. I've really enjoyed talking to you, listening to your experiences and your work. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, Sameer, thank you. I echo what Karen said. You know what, Kay? We love Sameer. Bring Sameer back.
Yeah,
Bring Sameer back.
Incredible.
What an amazing conversation. What an inspirational conversation. I love having intellectual conversations. Part of the reason I love this podcast. But I love just talking to therapists about therapy. I'm just a geek. I love it. Absolutely love having my brain expanded, and my neurons are like dancing around now. So thank you, Sameer. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
We have loved having you on. There was one thing I wanted to address, but I think I'll leave it for another podcast. But when we talked earlier, guys, about cultural match in therapy, just to clear up anything, we talk about the nuance, Black men to Black women, South Asian man to South Asian man. We don't exchange recipes and get all friendly and pally in therapy. I don't talk to my Black clients about Black culture unless it's relevant to them. But what we mean by that match is that there are some things you don't have to explain. Like the West has a very individualistic culture, but the rest of the world doesn't necessarily. So we exist and grow in community. So when you are hurting, the healing happens in the community too. It's not go away and lick your wounds, heal yourself, and then come back. So just wanted to clear that up, that we are still very ethical, very boundaried professionals.
Absolutely.
Even whilst we work with nuance. So Sameer, a pleasure as always. Thank you for coming on. And hopefully we'll see you on for part 2 of something. I don't know what yet.
Can't wait.
Brilliant.
It's great. Thank you.
So Karen, Sarah, take us out with the outro, please. Our information.
I will do it. So we are on Instagram at Beautifully Melanated, at Beautifully Melanated Podcast, and we are Beautifully Melanated Podcast at gmail.com. We also have a new YouTube with all our episodes going up with the same name, Beautifully Melanated Podcast. So have a listen to our episodes on YouTube, listen to us on Spotify, follow us on Instagram for all the good stuff. So yeah, we will see you after half term. As I mentioned, we're having a break for half term, and then we will see you after that for another episode.
Real.
Right. Take care.
This episode comes out on Monday the 7th. Bye.
Bye.
Beautifully.